Oh, there we go. Hey, hello and welcome to Lux Digital Church. Thank you so much for being here and joining us this evening. My name is Mark, and I probably should say that at the beginning instead of later. I am the founding pastor here at Lux Digital Church, and man, it's an honor to have you with us. Whether you've been with us every week so far, you're here for the very first time this evening, or you are just strolling through just chatting streams and you found us here on Twitch, we just want to say welcome. You're our honored guests. We appreciate you, and we're so thankful for you. And once again, you can get connected with us in the panels below, or even come and join our Discord community. We would love to get to know you, learn where you're from, learn your name, learn what type of games you love to play. Tonight, we're starting our very first series at Lux. We've never done a series here before, and that makes sense because this is literally week 3. But this is our very first series at Lux, and the series is called The Fight Starts Here. The fight starts here, and we're ecstatic about starting the series. I'm personally really amped up. It's sort of weird preaching to a camera because I'm used to preaching to a room full of people, and it's a very, very different experience for me. But I am very excited about starting off this new series. This series will focus at least a little bit on mental health, but more importantly than that, it's going to focus in on the root of mental health, or the root of some of the issues that each one of us experience when it comes to mental health. It's about regaining control over our thought life. It's about regaining control over our brain. It's about being the masters of what goes through our own heads. Now, before we get started, although it will brush up with some mental health issues, I want to be really clear about at least a couple of things. One, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a therapist, and I'm certainly not a mental health expert at all. And I am not intending to be. I'm not going to pretend to be. And there's nothing that we are going to discuss over the next couple of weeks that is going to make up for or fix a chemical imbalance where you need medication. And to be clear, I'm not against in any way, shape, or form medication when it's needed to correct a chemical imbalance for mental health. However, I also realize that we live in what is probably the most medicalized and drug-induced cultures in all of human history. So many people take medications for one reason or another, and some of them are very necessary. At the same exact time, I also realize that many of the things that we consider to be mental health issues are at the very least adjacent to spiritual issues. And while there sometimes need to be medication to treat and adjust things inside of our brain chemically, there are also things that simply cannot be treated with medication. And when our brain is completely out of control and we have no control or mastery over our own brains or over our own thought life, it can run out of control. And so this series is all about regaining control of our brains and gaining control over our thought life. We're going to be going along with a book that's written by Craig Groeschel. It's a recent book. It's called Winning the War in Your Mind. And in fact, there's a link in the chat to it right now. So if you would like to read the book along with us, you're welcome to. Grab it on Amazon. It's pretty inexpensive. You can have it in a couple of days if you have Amazon Prime, which you should, because Amazon Prime is amazing. And you can read along with us. Each week in this 4-week series, we'll be going through a different portion of that book, one of the 4 sections. Each section is about 3 chapters long. And so this week, our message is entitled, and you would think I would have that title memorized, but I guess that I don't. This message is titled The Replacement Principle, which parallels the same name in the first section of Craig's book, Winning the War in Your Mind, The Replacement Principle. Today, I'm going to seek to make one point so that we can take it out and live it out in the week ahead. And it's actually a point that's highlighted in Craig's book, and it's going to be at the bottom of the screen. It's this: a lie believed to be true will affect your life as though it's true. A lie believed to be true will affect your life as though it's true. Let me unpack that a little bit. When I was a child, I raised rabbits. I know, it's like super cool. But I had rabbits. I grew up with a family. Both sides of my family were kind of farmers. My dad was a farmer. My mom grew up on a small farm. So I spent a lot of weeknights and weekends on farms. And we raised different animals at our house throughout my childhood. There were times when there were goats at my house, there's small horses at my house. Now, but whenever I was a kid, I was in 4-H. Once again, really, really cool kid. If you're unfamiliar with what 4-H is, don't worry, because I was in it and I didn't remember what the 4-H's were. The 4-H's are head, heart, hands, and health. And I didn't look any deeper to figure out why, because it was a boring Google search. Really what it is, it's an opportunity for kids who live in the country or live on farms to come together. And what they end up doing is raising animals or doing projects. And then they typically sell those things at a local county fair sometime during the summer. So some kids raise beef cows, others ride horses, some do woodworking projects, others raise pigs or things. I was the lucky kid who got to raise rabbits. And you're correct if you were thinking, I wonder if that kid who raised rabbits, was scrawny, traded Pokemon cards, and used mousse to style his hair was ever bullied. I was pretty intensely, actually. But I was like kind of a strange kid. I will say this, because it's important to make note of, that there was a point in which I served as an officer in the 4-H club. That's right. You're looking at the former youngest vice president of the Big Knob 4-H club. Kind of a big deal. And actually, I'm not 100% sure that's true. I was the vice president, youngest, I'm not sure. But anyway, I was in 4-H. Now, years later, after raising lots of rabbits, I have to show for it a lot of useless information about rabbits, like what a dewlap is for and how to see what a gender of a rabbit is. I can do those things because of 4-H. So I would take my rabbits to the fair every year. But at home, we had like the Taj Mahal of rabbit hutches. If you don't know what a hutch is, it's like an enclosure you put rabbits in. We had this giant 2-level rabbit hutch with a big chain link fence around the outside of it. It was like the most lit rabbit thing that anyone in 4-H had. And I raised literally dozens of rabbits. That was kind of my thing. But occasionally rabbits would escape from the fort of rabbit containment that we had in my parents' yard. Sometimes they would get out and they would dig underneath the chain link fence, or we would let them out and forget to close the gate and they would escape. So one day, one of our rabbits escaped and we were trying to catch it. My brother and I, we were very young. My parents live on a pretty big piece of land, but we were never allowed in the front yard because our house bordered a busy road. So the rabbit ran into the front yard where me and my brother weren't allowed to go. So my mother came out to help us catch the rabbit. And if you don't know this, it's impossible to catch a rabbit that doesn't want to be caught, especially if you're trying to do so with bare hands and 2 children. Exceptionally difficult. So my mother came up with a bright idea that she would go next door to the neighbor's house. This neighbor was a fisherman, and asked for a net, to borrow a net, like a big fishing net. We thought that perhaps we could corner the rabbit, net the rabbit, and return it to rabbit paradise in my parents' backyard. Unfortunately, when my mom went to our neighbor who had a fishing net didn't offer to give her a fishing net. Instead, he offered her some helpful advice. He said, don't you know that if you simply put salt on a rabbit's tail, it can't run? If you just put salt on a rabbit's tail, it can't run. Now, any logical adult would think that's ridiculous. What could possibly prevent a rabbit from running? Certainly not salt on its tail. Maybe no legs, but certainly not salt on its tail. But we did it anyway. So for the next hour, my mother, my brother, and I took the can of Morton salt outside, and my mother poured it into mine and my brother's hands. And then we chased the rabbit around the yard and threw salt at the rabbit, trying to land it on its tail in hopes that magically when salt landed on the rabbit's tail, that its feet would get glued to the ground and it would be stuck there. About an hour after that, my mother returned to my neighbor dejected because the salt trick didn't work. And you can just imagine when my father came home from work that day, the type of reaction that he had, and he did not want to show his face at our neighbor's house for quite some time. The truth is that a lie that we believe to be true will impact our lives as though it were true. For years, humanity believed that the earth was flat. This prevented people from leaving view of the land in fear that if they got lost at sea, they would fall off of the edge of the world. When Christopher Columbus explored the New World, he named the indigenous people that he met Indians because he believed he had sailed around the world and reached India. In Salem, a small town in the northeastern part of the United States, they believed their town was infested by witches, and so they burnt a lot of women at the stake. In 1792, this is really interesting, George Rapp left Germany and formed a religious group in Pennsylvania called the Harmony Society. They were almost a small commune, in fact, one of the most successful ones in the New World, but they don't exist today. Why? Because one of the central tenets of the commune was that Jesus was going to come back and return in their lifetime. Therefore, they saw no reason to reproduce because Jesus would come back. Eventually, with this sort of law and mandate in place, everybody from their commune ended up dying off with nobody to carry on their tradition or heritage in the future. A lie believed to be true will affect our lives as though it were true. Lies are one of the main ways that our enemy tries to destroy our lives. And when I say the enemy, I do mean the devil. The Bible teaches that we as humanity have an enemy, and that enemy is named Satan. And Satan's nature is to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And in many cases, he destroys our lives by convincing us to believe in lies. He convinces us to take things that aren't true and to believe that they are true. Perhaps you've believed some lies as well. I'm going to read this because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. What lies are impacting your life as though they are true? Perhaps you've believed that you're useless. Maybe you believed that you'll never get out of debt, never be able to find someone who loves you for who you are. You'll never be able to lose weight, never be able to find a job that's fulfilling, never measure up, never be enough, never be able to overcome your addictions, never stop looking at porn, never make your parents proud, never be able to trust again, never be able to love again, never be able to forgive. That you're weak, worthless, purposeless, stupid, lazy, or that you're a victim. Perhaps you believe that you're not worthy of forgiveness or that you're incapable of getting out of that destructive relationship or that bad situation. But my question for you is this: what if that's not true? What if you're believing these things, but you're believing in a lie? What if you think the world is flat, but it's actually not? What if you believe you are in one place and you're actually somewhere completely different? What if you believe that you're going to sail off the side of the globe, off the side of the world, and it's preventing you from getting to the new world, to a fresh land, to a season of refreshment, to a time of renewal, to a time of rebirth? What if you're chasing around a rabbit with salt and you could drop the salt and you could pick up a net? What if these things you've believed about yourself, these roots inside of you, aren't true at all? What if you're just being impacted by something that's a lie, but you've believed that it's true? Listen, we all encounter lies every single day, but we don't always believe them. For example, I encounter advertisements. I'm bombarded by them, and so are you every single day. And the basic lie that they're saying is, I'm not happy or my life won't be complete if I don't buy the product that they're selling. And I'm sorry, but every time I see an advertisement for a new toothbrush or a fancy type of shampoo or a Honda Accord or Raid Shadow Legends, I don't feel compelled to purchase those things or play those games. I don't buy into the lie. Yet there are some lies in our lives that control us. So what allows some lies to get into our lives and radically shape who we are? And what makes some lies bounce off of us, defeated, incapable of penetrating into the innermost places of our lives? What allows some lies to control us? And what prevents some lies from controlling us? Well, the reality is that a lie, if believed for long enough, ceases to be just a lie. I believe it begins to be something that we're going to call a spiritual stronghold in our lives. It actually literally changed in terms of brain anatomy, begins changing the anatomy, the physiology, the makeup of our brains. Lies have the power, and we're going to dig in really deep to this in the next couple of weeks, but lies have the power to reshape the way our brain works and develop strongholds. The Apostle Paul, first off, let me just tell you a little bit about the Apostle Paul before we get to the passage for this evening. The Apostle Paul planted churches all over the place. He was originally known as a man named Saul. He was a Jewish leader, a rabbi, a Pharisee, basically a lawyer or a religious leader, and he sought to destroy the first church. He sought them out wherever they were, he imprisoned them, and he laid down his permission at their murders, which is a strange thing in and of itself, because it's something he could actually be criminalized for, because in Rome, only Romans could condemn somebody to death. But Paul would condemn Christians, followers of Jesus, to death. He had a genuine encounter with Jesus Christ on a road. And when he did, he came to faith, and his name stopped being Saul, and he became known as a man named Paul, somebody that most Christians look to as one of the fathers of the church today. Paul went around and he started churches. And in one of the places that he started a church, it was in a place called Corinth. Corinth was sort of ancient world Las Vegas in the Roman Empire. It was a place that was known for its debauchery. People would say you're living like a Corinthian if you were living an immoral lifestyle. And when he went and started a church there, he started it amongst a group of people who were almost all pagans. None of them had any experience with the Jewish God, and certainly no experience with Jesus. But inside their city, there was other gods. In fact, one of them was the Greek god of love that was typically worshipped through shrine prostitution. You can imagine what that might be. So the Corinthians were well aware of what it was like to believe in lies and have it impact their life as though those lies were true. And so when Paul started the church there and people came to faith in Jesus, it meant a radical reorientation of their life. Everything was different for the church in Corinth, for the Christians in Corinth. And Paul wrote several letters to them to encourage them and to challenge them. Tonight, we're going to read a brief excerpt from one of those letters. It says this: "Although we live in a world, we don't fight our battles with human methods, or weapons that we fight. Our weapons that we fight with aren't human, but instead they are powered by God for the destruction of fortresses. They destroy arguments and every defense that is raised up to oppose the knowledge of God. They capture every thought and make it obedient to Christ." I love the Common English Bible translation of this passage. However, in some of the other translations, they actually translate the word fortresses as strongholds. And there's an interesting and nuanced difference in the ancient world. To us, fortress and stronghold might seem like the same thing. To an ancient hearer, however, they would be different. See, a stronghold was the most difficult and most difficult to take and most defensible place inside of a city or inside of a fortress. While they had a city on the outside or a fortress on the outside, the stronghold was the last defense. The city may have had a wall, but the stronghold often had walls of its own, sometimes up to 20 feet thick. Strongholds were typically equipped with a private water supply and an opportunity to have food and food stores so that many people could live there for sometimes months and other times years to live through a siege or a time in which the city fell to an enemy force, an enemy army. In Paul's day, one of the most iconic strongholds was the stronghold of Masada, which still stands, well, kind of stands today. Masada is in southern Israel, and it was built by Herod the Great. There is this enormous plateau with hundreds of feet of cliffs on either side of it, all around it. They built a wall on top of it, and there they placed Herod's safe haven, his stronghold. It was in the desert where it was hard to get water. And so what they did is they came along the cliff sides and they chiseled channels. So when it would rain, only a couple times a year, that water would hammer against the side of the cliffs. And as it rolled down the cliffs, it would hit the channels, and the channels would then direct the water into the side of the mountain itself. And it would empty into hidden cisterns deep within the rock. And then Herod would have his men, they dug these channels through the center of Masada down into the rock itself where they would gain access. It was so that him and hundreds of soldiers and governing officials could get away if there was ever an enemy that was occupying the area. It was supposed to be the place of ultimate defense. We also see a stronghold in Lord of the Rings. If you remember in Lord of the Rings, the second movie, The Twin Towers, there's a point in which our heroes are defending Helm's Deep. There's an orc that runs up and there's a massive explosion and the outer wall goes down and the orcs surge through in incredible numbers. And all of the armies retreat back to the stronghold, the last defensible place. When Paul is talking about strongholds that are in our lives, he is talking about the most defensible, the most difficult place to conquer. And in your life, that is where lies lie. Lies that you've believed for your whole life, that is where they exist. They exist in the deepest recesses of your brain. And the tricky thing about spiritual and mental strongholds is oftentimes you don't even know they exist because they are lies that you believed so long ago, you don't actually remember believing them at all. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to begin identifying those things. As a child, I developed some spiritual strongholds based on lives that I believed to be true that impacted my life as though they were true. I believed as a young kid that I was a loser and that I was stupid. Two simple things that many children believed. I believed it because I was pretty ruthlessly bullied whenever I was younger. And we're actually going to dive into that a little bit more next week when we talk about some of the strongholds that I still deal with today. The other reason was because I was a really bad reader. It was a lot of summers of hooked on phonics. Brown and tan and green and tan, red and tan vans are nightmares to me. If you were a hooked on phonics kid, you know what I mean. It's not super cool. But I was a bad reader and I was constantly picked on and bullied. And because of those two things, it was oftentimes really hard for me to believe anything other than the fact that I was a loser and that I was stupid. In fact, I believed them to the point where I would say them and they became ingrained in who I was. I believed these things about myself to the point that when I was in fourth grade, I was ready to take my own life. I was done. Now, of course, these things are lies. They're not true. I don't believe that I'm a loser, and I do believe I'm at least of average intelligence, although I do know from an IQ test that Greg is actually smarter than me. He didn't even laugh, and he's right here. I know that I'm not stupid, and I know that I'm not a loser. But those lies impacted my life as though they were true to the point where they actually threatened to take my life. In order to overcome those things, though, I had to identify the lies, see where they are, and then I had to overcome them with the truth. See, the fix is actually pretty simple. It's just not easy. We identify the lie and we tear down the stronghold. We identify the lie, we tear down the stronghold. Simple, but it's not easy. In fact, it's incredibly difficult. In the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about how we pull down, tear down, scorch the strongholds of lies that are in our lives. The lies that we've believed about ourselves. Today, we're just going to talk about how we identify it. And it's actually not very hard to identify the lies that we believe in either. We're just usually a bit too cowardly to do it. One of my main points for tonight, which is going to be up on the screen, is this: we would rather be distracted than healthy. We would rather be distracted than healthy. Too often, we're too busy, too overwhelmed, too stressed out, too whatever to be able to deal with the strongholds in our own life. We're too exhausted to deal with the lies that we believe. And so instead of dealing with the lies in our lives, we keep chasing the rabbit around with a can of Morton salt as though that's going to freeze the rabbit in place and stop it from running from us, and we're going to be able to solve our problem. Instead of getting the net, we just keep emptying cans of salt in our life and tossing them at the wrong things with no hope of ever actually fixing the problem. So instead of solving the problem and confronting the lie at its source and uprooting it in our lives, which is terribly painful, but it's healthy healthy for us to do. Instead, we keep having 2 drinks at the end of the day to take the edge off the day. We keep smoking that joint to help us fall asleep at night. We keep looking at porn because we're afraid of intimacy, or we keep hooking up with somebody because it's pretending to find intimacy. We keep destroying our lives with the same things. We keep putting quick fixes on relationships that deserve our full attention. We keep ourselves distracted. We keep going to anything but what will fix it, because what we're looking for is a quick fix or an opportunity to push it to another day. And let me just be clear, our enemy wants you to push it. He wants you to push it to another day, because he knows if you're tied up with lies and you have to self-medicate or you have to manipulate in order to break free from them, that he has you exactly where he wants you, because you can't possibly be effective in the plan that God has for your life, because you can't see the plan that God has for your life, because you're too strapped down by your insecurities, your problems, and your addictions to be able to deal with it. Do you realize that the lies that you believe keep you imprisoned? They keep you chained up. They keep your mind shackled. They keep your spirit down. You can't hope to escape if you don't confront the lies. But the reality is, most of us, most days are simply too scared. We're too scared because we're too scared to say, I don't feel like I'm lovable because my mother walked out on me. And now it's destroying my marriage because I have completely unrealistic expectations for my wife, and she feels like she'll never be enough for me. We're too scared to say, I feel like I'm stupid because my dad told me every day that I was stupid. And now I need everybody around me to think that I'm smart so that one day I might be able to believe that I'm smart, and it's destroying my friendships. We're too scared to say my ruthlessness in achievement and my ambition at any cost is this deep-seated desire to prove that 6th grade bully wrong, that I'm not who he said I was. There are so many things that we heard, words that echoed in our brains, words that were spoken that the person who's spoken it doesn't even remember it, but they've chiseled themselves in because we kept them and we repeated them and we channeled them and we'd allowed them to engrave themselves inside our brains until it formed our identity. But it isn't who you are. It isn't who you are. The things that have been said about you, the labels that you've been given, guys, they're not who you are. God says that you are a loved child of the Father who sacrificed his son on your behalf because he treasures you. You're a masterpiece created in his image, a facet of the Creator. There's a piece of his image that's in you that's never been in anybody and never will be in anybody. There's a piece of the Creator that only you have. This is the child of God that you are. You're not a loser. You're not an idiot. You're not an addict. These things don't define you. They may be part of your story, but they aren't your story. Let me say it again. They may be part of your story, but can I tell you, they're not your story. But if the enemy can keep you chained down to your titles and the things that you've been called, he'll keep you imprisoned and you'll never live in freedom. Can I just say today that Satan doesn't deserve a stronghold in your life? He doesn't. He doesn't deserve a stronghold in your life. He hasn't earned it. He shouldn't have it. And you can live in freedom. There is an option on the other side. There's freedom. There's life abundant. There's Zoe life. Life that's good. Life that flows on the other side of the lies that we've believed. But it takes fighting. Can I just be honest? Satan isn't going to give up the lies that you've told yourself that you don't even remember easily. It's a stronghold. It's not like going out and taking over something that's easy to conquer. It's taking a stronghold. It's the most defended place in your brain. It's the place where Satan has the most power. He has the most strength, but he's never had more strength than Jesus Christ. He may be strong in that place, but with God at your back, there's nothing you cannot do. And you have a God who loves you and empowers you to uproot and tear down strongholds. But let me tell you, God won't do it for you. You have to be willing to fight. So are you ready to fight? Because it's a fight for your freedom. It's a fight for your marriage. It's a fight for your friendships. It's a fight for following God with all your heart. It's a fight for a life you've never dreamed that you could have. It's a fight for everything. Are you ready to fight? Are you ready to tear down strongholds? And if your answer to that question is a resounding yes, then you're ready for our next step today. Our next step this week is hard, but it's powerful. Our next step this week, which is going to be at the bottom of the screen as well as this. Oops, I'm going to find it. I will engage in the fight this week by identifying the lies that I believe. I will engage in the fight this week by identifying the lies that I believed. It's time to sail to distant shores. It's time for new worlds. It's time to set aside the salt and pick up the net to catch the rabbit. It's time to fight. Let's pray. Father God, I know that each of us is living in chains to a certain extent. But I also know that tonight, there are friends, there are brothers, there are sisters who are with us, who are trapped. And they're trapped by a lie that they've believed from that friend that betrayed them, from that teacher who pushed them to the limit, from that coach that gave up on them, from that parent that abandoned them, from that father that spoke ill of them. They believed it. They've heard it. They've echoed it. They've repeated it. And every time they failed, they thought it. And it's chiseled in, but it's not true. They've believed the world is flat, but it's not true. They didn't believe a new world's out there, but it's not true. There's something better. There's freedom. And it's through you, Lord, but it's only if we fight. I pray, Father, that this week, that this year, that 2021 would be a year of freedom for Lux Digital Church, because it would be a year where the people of this community, where the people of this church, where the people of this fellowship, where your sons and daughters come together in unison to fight. They'll no longer put up with Satan pulling the strings or controlling their brain. They'll no longer believe the lies that were spoken about them, but they'll fight and they'll tear down strongholds this year. It won't be easy, but no fight's easy, and nothing is worth doing if it's not hard. It's going to be hard, Father, but it's worth it. Help us, Lord, in the power of your Holy Spirit to engage the fight this week. Help us not to just self-medicate. Help us not to turn to substances, to relationships, to manipulations, and to toxicity. Help us instead, Father, to turn our eyes towards you, focus ourselves on your Son, Jesus Christ, and give us freedom from the strongholds that have entrenched themselves in our lives. I love you, Lord, and I thank you. I praise you, God, because you are good. In your name I pray.